Hello, this is Yaakov Kronenberg from Jerusalem, and tonight another class in a series of classes on Aquarius ascendant, Saturn and the different signs. Tonight we'll be doing Saturn in Aries. Saturn in Aries is, well, first of all, let's say that they go together, okay, because Aquarius is a masculine sign, and Aries is two signs away, also masculine. One is air, and the other is fire, and they work together well. They're compatible, right? The air spreads the fire, and the fire heats up the air. And they work together, right? A person's got a lot of, fire, very egotistical, and he gets the newspapers, the air behind him, and they publicize him and help make him famous. And it works the other way. That the fire spreads the air because of his power, because of the people's power, and they spread the knowledge. And so they work together okay. The only problem is that this Saturn is in the fall in Aries. Saturn doesn't work so great in Aries. Again, one is Marsh. First of all, the two malefics. Saturn is a malefic. And Aries is the sign of Mars, which is also a malefic. So again, you've got two malefics together, which is always going to be a little bit pernicious there. It's not like Jupiter in let's say Jupiter in Capricorn is not a good example. Let's say Venus in Virgo. Venus in Virgo is in fall also, but Venus is a benefic, and Virgo is okay. It's a mercurial sign, so it's not going to damage like Saturn in Aries has the capabilities of damaging, because it's a double malefic. And when a person has a planet in fall, it's a little bit like the opposite. We talked last week about Saturn exalted. They're unrealistic. Planet in fall, they feel powerless sometimes, right? Because the Saturn is the sign of the control, right? Of control, of limitations. It's the planet of constriction, and Aries doesn't want that. Aries wants everything. It's the planet of Martian energy. It doesn't want to live in constriction and stuff, and so it pushes hard to break through that. Doesn't have the patience, right? Saturn is tremendously patient, and Aries has no patience. So it doesn't sort of work together so well. It can be a difficult combination, especially when it's your ruling planet. Now it's interesting, I've seen a lot of great Torah scholars actually that had tremendous patience, that had Saturn in Aries. But again, it's like there's a Talmud, it says if you really want to be successful in the Torah, you have to be like a raven. You have to be able to, forget about everything, just but what you're doing, and that's a different way of a different expression of Saturn in Aries. That the person could, go away and not worry about his wife and his family and money. He had ability to forget about everything and just concentrate on learning. I've seen a number of charts like that where the very, very Saturn in Aries is very powerful. But tonight we're going to see somebody who wasn't a Talmudic scholar. He was a daredevil, and we're going to look at his chart. The man's name was, his name testifies to Saturn in Aries rising. Well, there's one other thing I want to talk about before we get into him. I'll give you even a lead-in. Is when you have Saturn in Aries, it tends to work it's in the third house. So the third house we usually talk about is knowledge, right? It's the Gemini house, it's the house of knowledge, the house of education, the house of communication, the house of the neighbors, the house of brothers and sisters. And one other thing I wanted to teach you tonight is that it also is the house of travel. We talked about it last week. Remember, we had We did a woman who the ruler of the third was in the 12th, exactly opposite Uranus. So he said, from that you could predict a car crash, because the third house is traveling. And it's opposite Uranus, which is Uranus-Mars opposition is accidents. So here's a man who had his ruling planet in the third, in Aries in fall, and it was opposed by the sun in the 9th house, or almost in the 8th house, working for the 9th house, opposed by the sun opposing the Saturn, and that's one of the more malefic aspects, because they're both in fall, and each one is in the other's exaltation sign, but they themselves are in fall. And so it's a difficult combination, right? The sun suffers from that, right? And the sun itself is not so great to begin with. The sun is in fall, and the ascendant is Aquarius, where the sun is in detriment. So the guy had ego trouble, I'm sure. He had a lot of problems with his identity, with his ego, and he was a dropout, of course. He dropped out of school. You see that right away. The 3 and the 9 both in fall. And he was a rebel, and he was a hellraiser. What do they call it? The person was a hellraiser. And that just sticks out there with that Saturn-Sun combination. And right, and he also had Jupiter though in a nice trine to the sun, which helped it a little. But he was lucky. He had two good planets on the angles. Right, if you look at his chart, he had Venus exactly on the 10th house cusp, and he had Jupiter in the house of the ascendant, and so that sort of helped the man overcome it. So right, it modified his Saturn ascendant, right? It modified having the ascendant in fall with his Saturn sign on the ascendant, because he had Jupiter, the planet of expansion, in the 1st house, and Venus, the planet of love, on the 10th house cusp, and that helped them. And eventually he got into the movies. He became a daredevil. He became a stunt driver, and you see that right away with the 3rd house. That was our lead-in that for 3rd house affairs. The Saturn there in fall. He was a stunt driver. He would do all sorts of in the movies. He would play he would take the role instead of the main actor getting into the daredevil role. He would take over for him. And he would also he would perform stunts all over the world, dangerous stunts, and that's how he expressed himself. But he was lucky. He had the 2 good planets, the Jupiter and the Venus, which saved him from a really bad chart. That sort of saved his chart and improved it. Right? And I thank everybody for listening.